Wanted. Seeker of Sinful Spoils. I actually pulled this secret rare Yu-Gi-Oh card out of a blister pack today that I bought from Target. Maybe even still got the packaging to prove it. As it happens, this card is worth $100 on the secondary market. And we're going to talk about why that's insane to me. So, Yu-Gi-Oh, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh that is, can be really expensive. It's no secret, and it's been that way for a while. But I think it's honestly kind of unacceptable. I mean, I get it, this is a good card. In fact, it is what I like to call one of those cards. And by those cards, I mean Yu-Gi-Oh has this thing where every couple of years, you'll kind of get this new super spell card. This one searches Diabell Star, which is a really big popular engine in a lot of decks right now. It also can get you like a little +1 draw later on as well. So it's really good, and you need 3 copies of it if you want to run the Diabell Star engine. Being $100 a piece, that means you gotta have at least 300 bucks just to like get going with this. But there were cards like it, before. There was Nadir's Servant that came out in Rise of the Duelist. There was also Sky Striker Engage. And even before that, you could technically say like Zodiac Barrage. These were all spell cards that had pretty similar effects, where they just get you something straight from the deck really easily at a plus in some cases. And they all tend to cost, about 100 bucks, and you need 3. So, Yu-Gi-Oh has a trend of doing this. This isn't like a new phenomenon, but I think that it's one that definitely needs to change because I just don't really see why a Yu-Gi-Oh card should ever cost $100. I think that competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! It's already a pretty daunting thing to enter. We talk about it all the time on this channel. It's certainly very, confusing or overwhelming. There's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of combos, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to repeat that too much here. But I do think that anybody who wants to try out competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Should be able to do so at a reasonable price. And this, to me, is not a reasonable price. Age of Overlord is a great set, and in fact, this isn't even the only expensive card in it. There's also SP Little Knight, which also costs $100. It's an extra deck card that pretty much everybody needs right now to compete in tournaments. You'll at least only need like 1 copy, maybe 2 if you're pushing it. So it's not as bad as needing like 3 copies of this, plus the Diabell Star that goes with it. But I think that there's no reason for cards to cost this much. Why do they cost this much? Well, I mean, I guess you could say it's kind of a supply and demand thing, or it's what people are willing to pay, so I guess it's okay. But I think that Konami plays a really big role in this, alongside, to some degree, the players, but still really mostly Konami. They print these cards as secret rares knowing that they're going to be really popular and influential in tournaments, and I think that it makes sense they've got to try to move copies of this set somehow. But, I've said this pretty recently, I think that they need to adopt maybe a system that's closer to what the Pokemon TCG does, where if you have an expensive card in a set, there are also cheaper, lower rarity versions of that same card. And this isn't a really hard thing to do. I was opening the Pokemon 151 set recently. I wanted to build a Blastoise EX deck. I happened to pull the really expensive kind of alternate art Blastoise that was in the pack. It was worth like 60 or 70 bucks, which was awesome. But when I was building my deck, I realized, well, okay, I'm going to need to have like, 4 copies of this card. And the good news is there are cheaper versions of Blastoise in the set. There's one that costs about like $15 or $20, and there's even one that costs like $2 or $3. They're all the same identical copy of Blastoise. And so I think that that's something that Konami really should adopt in these mainline Yu-Gi-Oh sets as well, so that you could get a secret rare Seeker or wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils that maybe costs, 60, 70, 80, or even $100. But there should also be, like a super rare one. Maybe even, dare I say, a common one. Because to me, it makes no sense that somebody should want to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! But just literally be barred off from playing the cards themselves. Or even, heck, casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? If you want to just play casual Yu-Gi-Oh! And you like Diabell Star literally for the lore, then getting copies of this card is really rough. Now, I know Konami would have you believe, oh, well, the secondary market doesn't exist, guys. It's not really a real thing. It can't hurt you. In fact, what you should do is just buy more Age of Overlord packs until you eventually get 3 copies of Wanted Seeker of Sinful Spoils. Or maybe go to your local card shop and trade for it, because that's exactly how this all works. But, I mean, let's face it, right? There is a secondary market here, and you cannot reasonably expect to just open Age of Overlord packs until you get 3 copies of this $100 card. The fast track to doing that is going to maybe be trading, but people are going to want $100 worth in trades because the secondary market does exist. I think that we could solve this problem by just having the card printed in multiple rarities. And the thing is, you could, kind of flex your secret rare copy, maybe even give the secret rare one a different artwork. so it feels even more special and more different and all that great stuff. But I think that everybody should be able to get it. The same goes for Little Knight. The same goes for, what is it, Imseti, the Horus card that's worth like $50. I think that it would actually maybe, just at least as I'm estimating it, I'm not an expert in, product design or whatever, but I actually think that Age of Overlord would still be considered just as good of a set. It still has the influential metagame cards that are, in high demand, but more people could actually play them. Now, the second thing is that there is kind of this mentality that I oftentimes see in the community, like online, when people are talking about how expensive these cards are, that people should just, well, you should have gotten them early, right? You should have picked up your copies of Wanted, Seeker of Sinful Spoils back when it was half the price, back when it was only $50 or $40. And to me, that doesn't really, I don't really get that. I mean, great, it's cool if you have the foresight to, get an influential card a little bit earlier than the curve and maybe pick it up for less. Cool. But I mean, even then, that was asking people to spend $50 for a copy of the card, and that's also still not reasonable. And then there are some people that believe that, these trading card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Are luxuries. I've heard them described as that. And I just find that to be a little pretentious. I mean, come on, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a trading card game. I totally get the idea that, you do have to pull the cards or, whatever. Some cards are going to be a little bit rarer. But I don't think that it should be something where, like, people are literally just barred from playing the game if you cannot, casually afford to drop a few $100s on just a playset of cards. That's not really, at least in my opinion, and I get it, different people will view Yu-Gi-Oh! Differently. But to me, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was never really meant to be like a game where you couldn't, afford to play it. Like, it's seen as just this luxurious kind of thing that only just the bourgeoisie are able to play. No, I don't think that that's ever what Yu-Gi-Oh! Really was. I mean, I know that cards have always had price tags. I know that a secondary market exists, but I don't think that that's like really in the spirit of the game to be just prohibiting people from playing it. So this is something that I think Konami really should be addressing with the whole like multiple rarity things in sets. But I also think that maybe some responsibility could lie on the players. The reason these cards get to get away with costing $100 is because people are willing to pay them. So in my opinion, maybe things could change if people weren't willing to pay them, like pay the prices, pay $100 for, a Seeker of Sinful Spoils. The problem is though, even if you're not willing to pay it, somebody is. There is going to be a competitive player out there who's preparing for a tournament, and understandably, they need to get their hands on this card and they're willing to pay whatever it takes to get it. So that's going to happen, and that's why it's kind of hard to really say that it's like a player thing, that we can really influence any of it. I still think that ultimately it's just going to kind of come down to Konami, like how are they going to want to make this card, be accessible or not. Outside of the multiple rarities in one set thing, which, by the way, one last point on that, they've done that before, actually. If you guys have been watching our segments on the main channel, Rare Hunters and also Slifer Slackers, where we open like these old school packs, they did this in like the GX era where cards would come like ultra rare and ultimate rare, or they would come even like rare, just baseline rare, and then ultimate rare in the same set. And so the Konami's proven that this is a system that it's happened before, it's worked. It actually made opening those packs great because you could get a card like, let's say Karma Cut, it could come as a rare, so it was easy for people to get, but then you could also get like a really blingy, like, ultimate rare version. The same applied to like Divine Wrath and Brain Control and a Miracle Fusion, several influential cards from the day. So that's been a thing. It can work because it has worked. I think they should go back to it. But anyways, catching back up to my other point, I think if they're not going to do that in mainline sets, then they need to really reprint liberally. Rarity Collection was good. It was a great start. It's a bit of a slap in the face that there are still going to be really expensive cards that just come out that are new anyway. But I think that like a Rarity Collection every year could be really good. I've always been a really strong proponent of reprinting things just as often as you can. I remember when Ash Blossom got its first reprint. So it was first printed secret rare, super influential, was like, 80, 90 bucks a copy. You needed to have 3. And in its first reprint in the set, I believe was like Shadows of Valhalla, or maybe it was Legendary Collection Kaiba. Either way, even in those sets, it ended up being like 40, 50 bucks just because it was in such high demand. And it was still kind of hard to pull from those. And it wasn't until we got a common copy in a structure deck that it finally reached, reasonable levels of accessibility and price. But even then, as soon as those structure decks started to disappear from shelves, even common Ash Blossoms went up to $10, $15 a pop. And so, in my opinion, with things like hand traps and any staples that people want, Konami's got to just reprint and reprint and reprint and reprint. I think never stop reprinting these. Include them in structure decks, throw them into mainline sets as reprints. I think that they should be like promos and stuff for tins. I think everybody should be able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! As easily and accessibly as possible, and Konami should make it so. Now, my last little tidbit on this is that I think that something the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community should actually adopt a little bit more, not in official tournaments, but in pretty much everything else, is the use of proxies. That's actually one thing where like the Magic the Gathering community differs pretty wildly from Yu-Gi-Oh! That I found. People proxy in Magic the Gathering. Like, unironically, people just print proxies. And recently, Alec, who is building the Snake Eyes deck just for fun, he actually just ordered 3 proxy copies of this card off of Etsy, just from an Etsy seller. It was much cheaper. It was like $10 for 3 of them, and that was like after shipping. And yeah, he got them in common rarity, so they're not like secret, so it doesn't look like, you know, he's trying to deceive anybody in tournament. He's not going to play it in tournament, but for play testing or for playing around the house, there's just no reason to spend this much money on the card, but you should still be able to like play it. I think it also even makes sense if you're kind of testing something and you want to see if it's worth investing in the card. That could also be a really cool thing too. So yeah, that's my spiel on the whole situation of like cards costing this much money. I think it is not really worth it. I don't think that it makes any sense. I hope that it's something that Konami can maybe seek to address, because it just makes, it's one more thing that makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Harder to get into outside of everything else that can make Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty hard to get into. I don't think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs to be a luxury thing that only, you know, that only like people with a lot of money can play, and I don't think that you should have to like force yourself to, you know, hurry and invest really fast in the first day that the card's available before it goes up in price, because people just want to play cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are meant to be played. Like, that's plain and simple. The only exception where a card should ever cost $100 or more is like a prize card or something, right? That's the only real situation that I can see. Anyways, I'd like to hear what you guys think about this. Let me know down in the comments what's been your experience with buying cards. What would be some solutions to making this stuff cheaper? And yeah, what's the most you've ever spent on a card? Anyways, okay, that's going to be it. Subscribe to APS Amplifier for more talky videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.